Liam, good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Initially, you got in touch by Facebook, right?
Yeah.
About people not being allowed, because we were discussing it on the air, about people not being allowed to attend appointments with their pregnant wives. Your story was along those lines, although not pregnancy, obviously, because it involved your dad, who was admitted to the Mercy Hospital and was, very sad to hear, unfortunately diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And then there was 7 weeks when he was in there. Do you just want to pick up the story?
Yeah, I'll just start. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer 13 years previously. And in September of 2020, my mum suffered a stroke. And leading into Christmas, into January then, Dad started acting strange. So we got a bit worried about him. He was just doing strange things and acting strange. And unfortunately, after being brought into the Mercy, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer that metastasized to the brain.
Oh, and that's why he was behaving erratically. Yeah, you didn't know why. Yeah. Okay.
So we contacted the doctor here in where we live, and the doctor referred him to the Mercy, the A&E. He was brought in to the A&E. He was kept overnight. The nurse was asking him questions in the A&E. And
did he go in on his own and everything, yeah?
Oh, no, my mum brought him up. We got a taxi for him up because I was working. So he went up. Mum brought him up into the A&E, told the nurse what was going on. The nurse asked my dad to leave the room to take a urine sample just to get him out of the room to talk to my mum. And the nurse asked my mum, did she think he was putting it on? And that they'd keep him in overnight for observation. And when Mum was leaving the hospital, she was informed that she would not be allowed back into the hospital once she left to get him an overnight bag.
Do they ask the relatives of all patients whether or not their relative is putting it on?
That's the word she used, was putting it on. Is he putting it on? My mum said, I don't know.
Because he was showing symptoms of being confused or, dodgy on his feet or,
Yeah, he was very unsteady.
Irrational and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
The reason we actually got him sent up there in the first place was I was dropping him in to collect his pension, and he was walking into the post office, and all it was a little stumble. He just stumbled up against something, and I knew then something was wrong. Mum rang the doctor. Yeah. And he was admitted then into the Mercy. He went in, I don't have the exact date he went in February. It was early February. He came home the 24th of March. Sorry, no, Neil, I have it all wrote down here.
You're all right, pal. He went, yeah.
After a week in the hospital, I rang up just to ask how he was, because we'd been ringing at night time. But the nurses that were on at night time, they kind of spoke broken English, and all we were getting was that he was good, he had a good night's sleep, etc. And so I rang up, I spoke to the nurse that was in charge of the ward. She told me that my dad was after a stroke. And I asked her, was my dad going to die? And she said no. So a week later I was at work, and my mum rang.
I don't mean to jump in except from the point of view of clarity, if I feel I must. So he went into the Mercy, he was admitted, and your mum brought him there, and then she was told that she wouldn't be able to visit except for like 15 minutes once a week, wasn't it? 15 minutes,
but it would have to be granted. She wasn't granted a visit till the 5th week.
So for 5 weeks there was nobody going in, there was only phone contact.
Nobody allowed in. Nobody. Dad didn't have he couldn't use a smartphone. He couldn't even use a button phone, like only if you rang him. But he couldn't charge it or nothing because he didn't know, like he knew nothing about phones, like. Okay.
Incidentally, your dad Tony was only 59.
59,
yeah. So, at what stage then was he actually told that he had diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer that had spread to his brain?
They told my mum first. They rang her over the phone. She was on her own at home here because I was at work, and the doctor asked her. Alicia, are you sitting down? And my mum said, I am, doctor. And she said, I'm sorry, or the doctor said, I'm sorry to tell you your husband has stage 4 lung cancer. And I left work then because mum was on her own. I came home, and Dad always said to us that he never wanted to be in a hospital. His brother died in hospital, and he never wanted to be put into one, kept in there and left on his own. Like, so we agreed that we'd bring him home, and Mum would look after him, and I'd help out where I could with my brothers. Like, and in fairness, a girl, Lisa, my mum's friend, she helped look after him now as well. And all over the couple of months, we had 3.5 months of him at home. So we were lucky that way.
So did they try and treat the lung cancer? I mean, I think I think it had spread to a lot of his body at this stage, hadn't it, including his brain?
Well, basically, we went to pick him up. We were told we were on the way up to the Mercy. A friend of mine dropped us up just because Dad was being kept in because under the Mental Health Act, because when they told Dad the news, he was alone. He had no one. And he was just in the hospital bed.
Have you any idea how he reacted to that news on his own?
No, it wasn't. It was because of the brain. Is a strange reaction. Like it was like he knew because he was losing things, and he knew himself some bit that there was something wrong with him. But he was upset. Obviously, spoke to Mum over the phone when they were telling him they couldn't bring her up and tell him there, even though she's qualified healthcare assistant with no symptoms of COVID at the time. And he was upset over the phone.
And at this stage, we're into the middle of March, just gone. Before he came home, he was still in the hospital. Say, for instance, he left. He walked out of the hospital at one stage, didn't he? In his pajamas.
On Patrick's Day, he went missing from the Mercy. He walked, even though Mum went up for a visit, and she was escorted out by a security guard and walked to the ward by a nurse and told she'd have 15 minutes now to take it or leave it. And
no, I don't think she was told take it or leave it, but it was. Let's be fair, it was 15 minutes. She wasn't told take it or leave it.
She was told take it or leave it by the nurse on the ward.
Those words were used.
Those words were used. Yeah.
Was she challenging it or something?
No, because they didn't give her a visit for 5 weeks because they were told she was told that there were 6 men on the ward, and Mum said that one of those 6 men was her terminally ill husband who could die at any time. And she persisted that she should be allowed to visit her husband that's dying. And she was told that she had 15 minutes to take it or leave it. Yeah,
I mean, choice words, really, you know. It would have been much better if she said, I'm so sorry, but all we can do at the present time is 15 minutes. I'm so sorry.
No, those weren't the words. The word she used was to take it or leave it.
Yeah, and that's like you treat somebody who's arguing the toss about a table in a restaurant, you know?
Yeah. And
it's that table, take it or leave it, not when it comes to a loved one or a life. But so she was going in and out with security guards into the Mercy, but he just walked out.
He walked out in his pajamas, Neil, and his slippers, and he walked out and he was missing out of the Mercy for an hour and a half, despite us being told, despite us being told that he could not walk, he was unstable on his feet, and that they had to keep him in the hospital for so many weeks because he was, quote, a danger to himself and others, that he taken the news pretty bad that he had cancer, and that if he ever got out of the hospital, that he would throw himself in the river. And he was supposed to be under 24 hours supervised care.
Was he in a general ward now, or was he in a psych ward?
He was in a psych ward.
Okay, so he walked out of the psych.
A member of the psych team actually rang me up when just after we'd gone up to pick him up the first time, and asked me over the phone that my dad had told her that he jumped out of a window of a burning building and slid down a pole, and his legs were on fire. And was that true?
Of course it wasn't.
Yeah, and she was in the hospital, Neil. Like, I just felt like saying to her, take a look under the blanket. Like, does it look like, or ask the doctor to take a look under the blanket?
What's the point in asking that? I mean, that was kind of silly, really, wasn't it? Obviously, he was hallucinating. Your dad with the issues regarding his brain. He didn't know what he was experiencing. His memories were all over the place. But who found him in the city then?
We weren't told, but at the time,
but he was wandering around the city centre in his pajamas for an hour and a half
in North Main Street.
Main Street,
just the street off where the hospital is, and before Mam was granted a visit. I'm sure you're aware of the glass tunnel that connects the Mercy. Yes, I do know it. Yeah, he was told that did she want them to wheel him out on a wheelchair into the glass tunnel, and she could wave up at him.
That's heartbreaking. Yeah.
They thought that was a suitable visit.
I know, but I could also get a sense that they were trying as well under very, very difficult situations. We were talking about, it was February, but yeah, February was a bad, dark time after the Christmas numbers, They were possibly trying to facilitate as many other people as well as you and your mum at the same time,
Yeah, but the problem is, Neil, that they couldn't leave my mum in, but they let my dad out.
Well, he didn't get permission to go now, or a green card. No, he wasn't. He left the hospital under his own steam and shouldn't have. But clearly he was unwell. But he could have He could have thrown himself into the river.
And if he did, what situation would we be in now? Thanks to the Mercy.
Yeah.
I just want to say that we don't believe whatsoever, and hold no grudges against the Mercy that they contributed to Dad's death in any sense of way, because Dad was a smoker for 50 years. He had lung cancer. But the treatment what they put my mum through, they were asking or telling her to come up to pick up washing bags. We live, I'd say, my mum doesn't drive, Neil. And they knew she was after a stroke. And we live, I'd say, 40 minutes from the city centre. And she had to get the bus up to collect a washing bag one day, and it was pouring down rain, and there was 3 items in the washing bag.
Oh man, that's infuriating. It really is.
And that's the times we're living in, Neil. I saw Donegal O'Leary's speech in the Dáil about his wife, his partner, and the fact
that was childbirth, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I messaged Pat Buckley.
Why? What was he saying? Was he praising the CUMH or something like that? Is it?
No, he was saying that they kept him out while his wife. They thought that she was having a miscarriage, and that they wouldn't leave him in with her.
Oh, he was saying that this is this can't be tolerated anymore. The restrictions on Vizia.
Yeah,
very little has changed actually at the CUMH. Forgive me, Liam. I'm trying to give the time that your story clearly deserves. But Tony, your dad, eventually left home and went to Marymount. Did he?
No, he didn't. He never left home. His wish was to be at home.
Okay, correct me on that. Then go ahead. What happened?
And when he first came home, we were told in the hospital that he didn't suffer from what you'd call delirium. It's when you tumours in the brain, you start to imagine things that aren't there. And the first night Dad came home, he came home at 7 o'clock on the 24th of March. He went into bed. He was in bed and all for 10 o'clock. My mum called me down the stairs. Dad was sitting up in a pool of sweat. He said that the guards were outside waiting for him, and that they were going to arrest him. And I said, Dad, there's no one there. That's in your head. Explain it to him, despite being told that he did not suffer from any delirium in the hospital whatsoever. And
he might have been, he might have been suffering it. He might have been.
Yeah, but Mum
mental turmoil.
Mum works in she worked before she got the stroke. She worked in a hospital/hospice, so she'd be used to cancer, what way it affects people, and she knew what it was, and she knew that if he'd just suffered it that day, that it wouldn't be possible. He must have been getting it all along. And
I know. And this is, of course, because the diagnosis of cancer of the brain, was that an isolated incident, or did he have more like that?
He after a while it started to go away, but he'd have it during the day kind of thing. He'd say like, "Oh, the guard's gone down there," just past the window, and there'd be no guards past the window.
And how long was he with you? How long was he home?
We got 3.5 months, but we lost 7 weeks due to the Mercy keeping him in. We lost 7 weeks' time. Now, in the Mercy, the doctor said, after I went up to bring him home, we asked for a meeting with the doctor because they told us they weren't leaving him home after getting the spin up, and only 15 minutes before being told he could come home. I asked the doctor inside, I was told he had a stroke, and this week it's lung cancer. Would you misdiagnose people like that often? And they said it had all the looks of a stroke. And to which we replied, we wanted to know exactly what was wrong with Dad.
They did tell you that he walked out of the hospital, did he, and was wandering in the city or North Main Street?
They didn't tell us. They didn't ring us up the day he walked out. Mum had a visit the next day, and the nurse called her aside before she went onto the ward and said, this is what my mum told me, that she said Tony done something very bold yesterday. He left the hospital for an hour and a half. We found him on North Main Street. So
very
they told
bold.
her. They didn't tell her at the time.
She didn't do anything bold. Sure, he's ill.
He's ill. Yeah, he had brain cancer and lung
very
cancer.
Bold is like a word you would use. I don't know, you might use that word for a child. Did your dad, and he passed away on the 22nd of July, didn't he, with all of you with him?
He did. He wanted, the way he wanted it to be was him and Mum just together, and he didn't want his kids to see him die, so he died, and Lisa, my mum's friend that was helping her look after that, she came up and got me then, and he was gone then.
Would you have liked to have been there?
I spent enough time with him, Neil, over the week, because he was supposed to die the Thursday previous. That's what we were told. We got called that he was going to die. He'd taken a turn. We had nurses, 2 Irish Cancer Society nurses for one night. One night, that's all we had. Mum and Lisa did the rest. They stayed for the one night, 2 days out, so it was the Saturday, and they told us after we'd woken up, we came down the stairs, that he'd gone to the next stage.
Yeah, I know.
And we didn't understand what the next stage was, so I entered the sitting room where Dad was, and he had his eyes open. He was asleep for days, but his eyes were open. He had a thing called the death rattle, that when you can't swallow your spit or anything, and that was extremely loud, and he did look in some distress, so I called South Doc. South Doc came out, lovely doctor, gave him more morphine and just something to dry up the rattle.
I know, the death rattle, yeah. And he passed away.
He passed away, but just looking here now for we were offered, Mum was after a stroke through all this, and to show, we always say now, the bravery Mum had to look after Dad, and the strength to take him to the toilet on her own, look after him, feed him every day. There wasn't a minute she left him alone, Nick. Only for one of us minding him so she could go into the shop or get something. Did your dad
ever talk about the cigarettes? He was only 59, and you said he was a heavy smoker all his life. His cigarettes killed him. Did he have awful regrets about that?
No, Neil. He loved. That's all he had in life. Was just his cup of tea and the cigarette. He used to, or he gave out the drink, I'd say 2 years ago. He didn't do anything else. He was happy out just to sit down, drink a cup of tea, smoke a cigarette, watch the racing, So no, he didn't want his kids smoking, but unfortunately, some of us take up that as well. But
he surely must have regretted taking up cigarettes. He's only
maybe
59 when he does. Another 30 years on the clock there, no bother.
Yeah, that's what we said. Like, and it was just like catching cancer early is the big thing. Anyone that's listening there now, like when Dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, they said to him, catching it early is huge. And unfortunately, he had an appointment with a doctor in the Mercy, his cancer doctor, a yearly appointment. And I think it was either they cancelled it or else Dad cancelled it because he was worried about going into hospitals with COVID. But just, our mum was offered 45 minutes a day home help. 45 minutes. And when she asked what they'd do, that they didn't do cooking, cleaning, none of that. They could, quote, fluff a pillow or sit and talk to him.
Yeah, well, there would be a lot of hygiene issues that home help does, or healthcare workers in the home. You know, they would wash, change, take to the bathroom. Yeah. If it's a commode, they will help with the use of that.
Mum did all that. She's a qualified healthcare assistant. Like, she did all that. The support there for people dying of cancer and the families of people who have cancer is horrendous, if you ask me. Like, we had one night with nurses overnight, one night in 7, and we had a dying man in the house at the last stage of lung cancer, dying, and he was left with us. I had South Dock out twice, once in the morning after the nurses told us he was gone to the next stage, and again in the evening. Now, the nurses in Marymount, the nurses that came down in the morning were very good, in fairness. They changed the driver they put in because he couldn't swallow tablets because he was asleep. So there's like a syringe in the machine. Right. Yeah. It pushes in the...
I remember it. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
And they were good to us, in fairness. They talked to Mum and say how she was doing such a great job and that she shouldn't be disappointed because she tried her best, Neil, you know. And if there was more people out there like Mum, like that would... Now, I understand why people can't bring people home to die, you know, because of the service, because of the supports just aren't there for people. And people have to go into the likes of Marymount and be surrounded by sick people for the last couple of weeks or months of their lives, like, you know.
Well, it sounds to me as if she must have been absolutely exhausted herself, but she still ploughed on regardless. I think as well as that, I think it's a great tribute due to you to say kind things about your mother and indeed your dad. It's a beautiful thing, and I hope you're happy with the opportunity to share your story. Much of it very, very sad and clearly unacceptable, right?
Yeah. It's like, she loved him, you know. That was her one thing that they promised each other that they'd never leave each other, die in a hospital or alone, and she, like, even though she was after a stroke in September and she wasn't allowed to go back to work because obviously the after effects of the stroke, and she was still able to look after him, wash him, you know, clean up the house. And
I know. Well, look, I know that you're grieving the loss of your dad, you know, 22nd of July. You know,
yeah, it's still kind of raw.
It's very recent, but, you know, look after your mum as well. She lost her life partner. Right? You lost your dad, I know that, but, you know, look after your mum.
Yeah, we understand that. Like, my brothers and stuff, they'll ring her, and in fairness, now my dad's family, they're good to my mum. Like, they ring her up and check how she is and call down and stuff. Just, you know, the small things.
I know.
For anyone, like, just when I seen Donica's video about the hospitals, it kind of hit home with me how we were treated and what the government is actually doing to people. And, you know, it might not be the hospital workers themselves, Neil. They're just people, you know. These people we elect to the government, and a chief medical officer who we all know the scandal about the cervical cancer years ago, and I was just reading a headline the other day that he came out and he offered sympathy to these people, but he would not apologise, even though he stood over it at the time. And these people are left in charge of the country, and if you see what they're doing to people, like,
well, yours is a case history that everybody has heard this morning. Thank you so much for sharing, Liam, and again, our condolences to you and the family on the passing of Tony, and indeed to your super duper mother.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. I know you were busy this morning. Thanks very much.
Not at all. Never too busy to take a call. Appreciate it. Thanks, Liam. Take care.
Neil Prendeville, the voice of Cork. Weekdays 9 to 12. Cork's Red FM. Red FM. Red FM.